in and tell us about psychohistoriography. Okay, then, and I've got a copy of Fred's book here, so I'll be able to show it to people and they'll see what it's about. Okay, hang on a minute then.
Okay.
Right, thanks very much. This is an introduction to our fourth session this season of Black History Conversations. So it's good to have a crowd of people here. Our speaker today, Hilary Hickling, is Hilary Robertson Hickling, is joining us from Jamaica. But she's got a power cut, so we're doing it with a link with the phone. So Hilary is going to tell us a little bit about herself and her husband's work, the work of herself and her husband, Professor Fred Hickling, on his psychohistoriography. Over to you, Hilary.
Hello, good morning. Yes, well, I'm having a power cut, so what I will do briefly is to just identify some of the elements around this notion of psychohistoriography, which is in the chapter 2 on psychohistoriography, a post-colonial psychoanalytic and psychotherapeutic model. And basically what he had been suggesting, based upon many years of clinical observation and living in a what is called post-colonial society, but essentially we're talking about what some others are calling a post-slavery society, which also has various other complications. And so one of the things that he did was give a lecture when he became a professor early in the 2000s. And some of the issues seem to be so on time today. And it's all about European American psychosis, which says that contemporary Western civilization for the last 500 years has developed ideas and developed an episteme which has colonized much of the world. And that today we really have to unpack the elements of that so that we can move to the next level. And anyone who has observed the extreme outcomes in the United States must recognize that that is correct. So some have said it was a prophetic kind of idea, which was met with some skepticism and even hostility in terms of those who determine what is science and what is not science. Basically then, one of the thoughts was that when Edward Said was talking about Freud as a non-European, he identified something critical. It's very interesting to study and learn about exotic others, but surely there is a way in which the gaze will have to turn to the European and the American. I think, as I said, what is happening in the United States and in Britain and so on is all about recognizing that the gaze has to turn in the opposite direction. How do we do this? Well, one of the things was that apparently using an idea taken from historians and taken from psychiatrists, I think a lot of work from Carl Jaspers and so on, that historiography, which is the method of analysis of historical documents, moved beyond the documents to actual people who were in the Bellevue Mental Hospital where Fred worked in terms of a focus on rehabilitation. Of course, there's been a long dialogue and debate about the use of the asylum for the political purposes of restraining and containing any resistance to colonization. So in Jamaica, we have had Rastafarians who were incarcerated. We had people like Bedward who were incarcerated. And of course, I know in some other countries you had pregnant mothers who were incarcerated in Ireland. Anybody who did not fit into the bill would be locked away. So basically what then happened was when we looked at the historical documents and then we expanded the idea to include psychological elements, then we were able to come up with a diagram, which is this histogram, in which we look at, and I just use some examples. If we're suggesting that this notion of discovery. How can you discover people who are already there? Columbus couldn't discover anybody because they were already there. He may have met them, he may have encountered them, but he could not have discovered them. And so this myth of discovery has been one of the challenges of life in the Americas, which of course means that those who were there before, the Native Americans, the Amerindians, the Taino, whatever, that those are people who would have seen the discovery as something destructive and saw the people as invaders. I won't go into too much of the rest of the. Okay, this year or last year we had the Treaty of Berlin, in which we have the division of Africa between various European powers. How dare they? Because of course they didn't own Africa and the Africans. So on the other hand, the Africans will say that these are people who came. Some say with their Bibles, some say with their guns, and they stole the land. So part of the challenge we're looking at is that there's a dialectic which suggests that one's discovery is another one's plunder. And so we have to somehow, in this 21st century, find ways of repairing some of these clear breaches because we still have to share the same small world. So another example I could give is Capitalism and Slavery. Our own Eric Williams, the researcher, historian, and Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, said many, many years ago the fact that capitalism and slavery were intertwined. In other words, when you are able to ensure people's free labor, then you are able to use those resources to develop capitalism in Europe. So, of course, I wonder if we're saying that there is no parallel with the prison industrial complex in America, where the incarceration of people of color has allowed many large corporations to make fortunes because these people are unpaid. So I think that there are a lot of these dialectics that need to be challenged. And so the psychohistoriogram is a way of capturing the contradiction between one's discovery and the other one's destruction. This then has various implications for, I hope people will go on to read the text, but how do we repair the world? How do we help people to remain sane within this kind of madness? As I say, we see right now in the United States a situation unfurling where you have a group of people who believe that they have a divine right to rule the resources of the world and of America, and that people of color are subsidiary, secondary, old people are subsidiary, secondary, their lives mean nothing. And so we have a situation where white supremacy in this third decade of the 21st century seems to be taking on a similar shape to what happened in the 1930s in Europe. So how do we deal with this idea of this psychosis? It is about reparations. It is about finding a language which allows people to talk with each other through these historical wrongs. It is also about finding ways of acknowledging that damage has been done and that we have to repair the damage, or otherwise the world is going to be in a more difficult state because of this. And here we are fighting this pandemic, fighting a pandemic which is killing the poorer, the dispossessed, the old, the whatever, and we are now fighting about who will have the vaccine. In other words, we're saying who deserves to live and who deserves to die. And so it's some of these same ideas, if we don't find the language and find the opportunities to work these things through, then we're going to continue to have all of the problems we have. So psychiatrists, people including Fana and Fred, and many others, and people of conscience, across the world, like I hope some of the people to whom we're speaking this morning are recognizing that we have to address these problems right now. Because otherwise we're really destroying the world. I don't know if that is a point of discussion or the part that would come off from Liz.
Right. Okay, Hilary, that was brilliant. I hope you could all hear. Can you thumbs up if you could hear? Yeah, good. Right. Hilary, you covered a whole lot of things there. Do you have notes that you're reading from? Because it might be useful to perhaps share your notes at some stage.
Oh. what I did, you see, Liz, I had reread chapter 2, and I had, yes, I can put some notes together, and I had thought it would be, well, at 7 o'clock and so on. But guess what? One of the important things we're learning is our need to be flexible and adaptable.
Absolutely.
We have no idea. We have had no power cuts for a long time, but this morning there's one. So we just have to work with it. So what I will have to do is later today I'll put my thoughts together. Not more than a page, of course.
Yeah, but hang on a minute. I'm showing everybody chapter 2 in the book.
Yes.
Now, Fred's book, as you say, Fred wrote extensively, and some of his other books on psychology are absolute classics. Written from the perspective of from the Caribbean, but Fred and yourself also worked in England for a long time, for a time, so you know about things. So
and we lived also in New Zealand. Because, one of the interesting things is if you live in one colonial society, you are able to move quite. I guess I don't know if easily is the correct word. But there's a lot you understand about life in a colonial society once you have lived in one. And I think that is an important thing when we...
I think that's true, yes. I've visited New Zealand, and as an English person, you feel very much at home having afternoon tea and nice cafes.
Yes, and so some of the problems which are in one society issues in another one. Same set of ideas which is generating what is going to happen next. It's the same set of ideas. So if we're able to do this, then we're going to be able to
there's a great deal that we can do. Can I hear your little grandson there, is it?
Pardon?
Is that your little grandson I can hear?
Yes, he's I've had to pull him away from somewhere. Okay, I moved him into another zone. Okay. Yes,
now,
so
Hilary,
part of what we're saying is that...
Sorry. Hilary, I was going to ask if we could ask a favour. It's quite difficult for anybody to get hold of a copy of this book of Fred's.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering whether we could, if you would allow me to photocopy some of the pages.
Okay, because there are some which are the ones with the historiography which is helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, you can go ahead. You have my permission.
I think that would be really helpful. So it's the figure on page 47, isn't it? Which is this one, which compares. You won't be able to see it unless you put it on a big screen. It compares white Europe and black rest of the world. It's really fascinating. So if you don't mind, then I'll photocopy maybe 5 or 6 pages of this, and then we can take it forward. So that's really been helpful. Sorry.
One of the last things I want to say is that we think it is very important to disseminate our findings. Because what we're doing is that we're also trying to create a counter narrative. The prevailing ethos or as Fred described it in his lecture, which is where that chapter was based on, was the prevailing episteme has to change. The knowledge, the way in which we look at knowledge is important. So I am happy if people are going to be prepared to read and look at those chapters, and we'll have to talk about the book.
Okay. Do you still have copies of the book in Jamaica?
Yes. So we want to talk about that some more. How we're going to be able to do the dissemination, but begin with by copying those documents.
Thank you so much. I think it'll give people an idea and a start. Okay, so over to our participants. Is there anybody who wants to ask or comment particularly on what Hilary's been saying? Just looking around the screen here. Jessica?
Thank you. That was amazing, very valuable. I've put actually my question in the discussion, so I don't know whether that's visible to everybody. It should be. I'm interested to know how Hilary would advise us as educators, counsellors, people working in our communities, neighbours. How should we be working with people who've been separated from their roots and language and identity as a result of discrimination or slavery?
Okay. Very provoking question. The fact is, and I will just use a quick example. This separation is a very important thing. It's about grief, it's about loss, it's about trauma. And there are many, many examples of this kind of trauma in our world. It is in a way not only about Black people, but also it's about people who have been colonized. Because the efforts of the colonizer is really to destroy all of the capacities of the colonized person. Of course, within white societies, there are also some white people who have been colonized by the people of the superior social and whatever classes. So part of the challenge is how do we recognize the trauma and how do we address the trauma? Because part of the whole question has been the denial of the trauma. And there's been a lot of work done about epigenetics, which talks about the way in which we are passing the trauma down generation by generation. And so this then is, first of all, recognition. Second of all, recognizing that the human condition, wherever we are, so whether I'm a poor Caribbean third generation person in Birmingham, whose parents are unemployed, who cannot see any hope in the future, that is one kind of experience. As I said, part of it has to do to talk about the acknowledgement of people's basic humanity. Whoever you are, you're no less or no more. One. Two, when we are training our social workers, our psychologists, our psychiatrists, our people, there must be room for the person who is the professional to listen to what the other person is saying. Not to approach the person with a set of preconceived notions about who they are. And I'm going to bring this home here to Jamaica. Since Fred and I returned from Britain in 2000, I have been teaching in the University of the West Indies, which was originally a college of the University of London, which was one way in which universities were developed across the colonial world. An important lesson I have had to learn is that today's student is not from the same social class and background that I was then. Because even in a colonial society, one has a smaller group of people who are educated, who have had access to certain other kinds of resources. And one of the great lessons I have learned, and I'm now retired from the University of the West Indies, one of the great lessons is I have to listen, because my own society has changed so much in the last 2 or 3 generations that I cannot assume some of the things that I would have. So I'm saying that when we're training our professionals to work with people, we have to listen, we have to recognize that there are other experiences which have to be validated. We also have to recognize, and I think that this is a way in which sometimes your person comes out of his or her community and is able to come to look at the place from which these people have come. The last point I want to make, and I hope it will be a useful one. Some of the Caribbean migrants who went to Britain, for example, experienced downward social mobility when they went to Britain. If I was a registered nurse, I had to take a step down. If I was a teacher, I had to take a step down. So one of the things that happened, imagine, you have grown up in a colonial society. You believe that you are part of this society. You go into another society in which you are rejected, and you also are being devalued. Therefore, I think some of the people in Britain, for example, after 3 generations, some have gotten better off, but a lot have gotten worse off. And that now creates that sense of hopelessness and that sense of hopelessness. So I don't know if that can help. It's about us acknowledging the trauma and finding ways of addressing it. It's about embracing people and their humanity. You know? And it's about us being willing to have a dialogue with each other respectfully that says, well, some of the things that we are talking about. In fact, the work that is going on right now on our program is about helping to repair that damage.
Hilary, thank you so much for that. And Jessica, I think your question, how would you advise working with people who've been separated from their roots, language and identity? That was such an interesting answer. And I know some of the work, the times that I was working, Yasser Safari and I were working with you and Fred, we were doing whole day workshops, and you were getting us to do things creatively, writing, discussing, creating poetry, bringing together a presentation. It's really fascinating the way that you use the creative arts as part of the therapy sessions. And Hilary, I think that it would be really useful for you to, to share with us again, maybe even on a wider forum than this, because I know that the mental health professionals that you worked with in the UK when you were with us really appreciated it, and we were sad that we weren't able to offer more opportunities to more people. Sadly, Fred's no longer with us. Sadly, Fred passed before in the autumn time of Britain. A great loss to us all, and I'm sure obviously to you as well. Right, we've got another question. Apu, you were asking in your question in Jamaica, which history is being taught, Jamaican or British? My parents came to the UK. Go on, Apu, you say it.
Yeah, my parents came to the UK in the 1960s, and my grandparents came to the UK in the 1950s, preceding them. When I used to go home from school, etc., the only history, which I was shocked, the only history which they seemed to know was British history. They can talk about the Tudor period, the Stuarts, the Elizabethan period, as well as Queen Victoria. Is it still the case, Hilary, in Jamaica, that British history is focused on and taught more than Jamaican history?
Hilary, are you still there? Right, we now get to the point. Excuse me. Apologies. We've got to the point now where my Skype credits run out. I've got to buy some more, so I'll just buy some more Skype credit and then we'll be okay, hopefully. Oh, joy of joys. I have to remember my password as well. You can just imagine the stress levels. Here we go. Good question, that, Apu. Ta-da! Right. Got the Skype credit. I'll phone her back again and we'll be all right again in a minute. I'll just think this technology. She's speaking to me from Jamaica to Australia, and I'm transmitting it back somehow. I don't know how this all works, but it's wonderful. All right, let's see. Are you there, Hilary? You there, Hilary? Hello? Hello? Hello, Hilary? Joys of it all. Right, I'm just going to try again. I'll just give her a moment and then I'll try again. I'll talk about the weather, folks. Let me just find Hilary's number again. Here we are. Are you there, Hilary? Hilary?
Hello?
Hello, hello. Right, you're back again.
Yes.
Sorry, the Skype credit ran out. Here we are. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Applebagger was just asking this really great question, which is about, he was saying his parents came to the UK in the 1960s and they just knew about British history. Now, is it the case he's asking in schools in Jamaica, are you still teaching British history or do you teach Jamaican history these days and world history?
Okay, well, there are people are doing something called Caribbean history, which has to be able to explain the existence of the people here, but also has to look at the business of what happened when the British displaced the Spanish or the French or whatever it was. So, in a very interesting way, we've had the continuation of this European history because it is playing out. There's a reason why Cuba is Spanish and Curacao is Dutch, and Jamaica is English, and Martinique is French, and Haiti is whatever. So there's a way in which, in the 21st century, those old European matters are still playing themselves out in the Caribbean. So the history is explaining to the Caribbean people who they are and how they got here and what are some of the challenges and what needs to be done. So we're learning both. However, we also at the time, what is the word now? I was almost about to say under the boot of, we are 90 miles from America. And one of the things that has been made clear is that when the British Empire was waning in the 1940s, etc., that they handed over to kith and kin, the Americans and the Canadians to a lesser extent. And so we have been under the American hegemony in this region for the last century or more. So there have been various wars and various things that have happened and are continuing to happen as the Americans try to suggest that this Caribbean is in their backyard. So the Americans, some of them rather, felt quite at home to place additional sanctions on the Cubans, even where they are providing health care for their own people and people across the world. They have been trying to do things with the Cuban vaccines, and I'd like to just make a point here. There is absolutely no way that a country like Jamaica is going to be able to afford to compete with Britain or Canada or the United States for the vaccine. It is just not going to happen. Yet we have Cuba next door, which is developing its own vaccines. And the Americans have tried their very hardest to make things impossible. No, that is completely ridiculous. For the purpose of, what is the word now? Appeasing their electoral base in Florida. That they are prepared for people to die because of no access to health care. That's ridiculous. So, this is the kind of thing that says that all history is continuing. The history is continuing, and so it isn't past tense, it is present continuous. You know, those of people who are studying the issues of language, the business of past continuous. So the Americans have followed through and have been trying very hard to make life even more difficult than is necessary. So it's not something that's finished, it's something that's going on. How do we deal with it?
Right, it's such a challenge you're raising there. If I can just come in, Abu, when I've been in Jamaica, I've been fascinated to see the quality of the history books that children are using in Jamaica. Really, really high quality, which would be useful, I think, to families in the UK who are interested in Jamaican heritage. But we did make an attempt at one stage to make these books available in the UK, more easily available, and that wasn't successful that time round, because there seemed to be a feeling, I don't know if this is awful to say, but a feeling within the Caribbean communities that, well, if it came from Jamaica, then it wouldn't be as good as the materials that the children were getting from their English school.
Let me bring a parallel point to you.
Okay.
I read an article. I think it came out of the Guardian. I did make a note of who wrote it. It was saying that the British elite always mock up things, but they leave things on the rest of the population. So, for example, whether Brexit or whatever it is, kind of a challenge. And so there's this continuous promotion of the idea of around the matter of this colonial heritage and its superiority. Which actually, when you are even in Britain, it doesn't make sense. I now recognize when I lived in Birmingham that I was born in 1954. So I was born while Jamaica was still a British colony. But my name was Hilary Robertson. I knew all about the daffodils. I knew all about Britain. I knew all about Britain. I can just imagine what happened to those people who went to Britain believing that they belonged. So generation after generation, you have cut off ties. You have cut ties with the Caribbean. And you are trying to operate as a person who belongs in a place with a constant process of rejection. How does that make people operate and feel? There's no room in the inn for them. Absolutely no room in the inn for them.
Yes, it's a real issue.
So you say, I think a very important part of it for both the people who are, whether it's the teachers, the people from the system or wherever they have come from, is that it's about being able to visit Jamaica themselves. It's about having a realistic perspective, not through the lens of sitting in Leicester somewhere, but from your own, as you have seen your own experience of visiting Jamaica. Because Britain has been in Jamaica since 1655. I mean, that's not yesterday. So Britain has deep roots here, and there's a way in which people are pretending that it's like suddenly in 1940 these people appeared out of thin air. That's total rubbish. Just total rubbish. So that is part of this whole question about unpacking the truth. And I think the people who work in psychology and psychiatry need to take the lead in terms of saying how this human behavior shaped by this knowledge and so on. You know, how. Historians, people need to understand the truth. And I don't mean my truth, I mean, what does it mean for a place to have been colonized since 1655 by Britain? What does it mean when the Spanish came came in 1492. All of these are then things that go into explaining what's happening in 2021. I've had the opportunity of visiting most of the Caribbean, with from Suriname to all different places. There's some things which are similar, and there's some things which are not. But that is a very important eye-opening. It's similar if you visit Europe. There are different countries, but there are some similarities. And so, of course, now I guess people in Britain, maybe by different generations, are waking up to the differences in Europe. And of course, Brexit and those kinds of things are pointing some directions that many people have not been aware of. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to unpack, you know?
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, there is a lot that we need to unpack, and thank you. That was a great answer to the question that you posed, Abu Bakr. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I've got a message here from Jessica to say thank you for your wisdom, Hilary. And it is great to talk with you. Hilary's on Facebook, and she's often putting some very wise words on Facebook, which kind of wise words first thing in the morning, I think. Yes. Right. Okay. Now we've got a question from Professor Sati Fwakshak. I always get your name wrong, Professor Sati. And Professor Sati says, Hilary, your narrative about colonialization in Jamaica validates the theory that colonialization was generally oppressive. I agree with you on the need to repair the world. Your suggestion about reparations is still debated. What is your perspective?
Okay, I'm actually growing and listening more to that discussion, because I see reparations operating at several different levels. At an interpersonal level, if I have done someone some wrong, then there's a way in which we have to have systems that help to repair things. I think since this week it has been Holocaust something, and the Jews have ensured that there have been reparations because of the genocide which took place in the 20th century. Now, there have to be various ways, and I'm not suggesting there's only one way, of repairing some of the damage that has been done across generations. And I think that some of it is going to have to be economic. Some of it is going to have to be, I don't even know what the words are, but as spaces for discussion about what it is to have wronged people and what it is to be able to repair the situation. Because part of the problem is, and I think a former British Prime Minister came to Jamaica, and we subsequently learned that he was one of the families that benefited when Britain compensated the planters after slavery was abolished. The slaves received nothing, but the planters received money, which I think it was within the last decade that the final payments were being made. Now, how can that be correct? That the people, the beneficiaries, because they say that it wasn't they who did it, they have been beneficiaries, and the beneficiaries therefore owe something to the people who have been wronged. So I think that is also an important lesson that we have. Those who are in power, of course, never want to give up power, never want to acknowledge they have done anything wrong. But clearly, we have this situation in front of us. So I'm suggesting that reparations, it requires a very creative, intentional, thought-provoking approach as to how to and there are various kinds of wrong. I saw, for example, that the Hilary people in Southern Africa, that a group of them had been killed by the Germans, and that the people were fighting for reparations, and it was not yet resolved. So there are legal ways in which it can be done. There are many other kinds of ways in which these things not only can, but have to be done. Because otherwise, otherwise we carry grievances for centuries. And this then is, and so the beneficiaries go richer and fatter, and the others grow leaner and die. And therefore, we're now looking at that situation. What is the range of strategies for reparations? And I do hope, I hope that this new generation of people is looking at this. For example, right now in Jamaica, we're having a battle about the excavation of areas where there's bauxite. The Canadians and the Americans largely have been able to excavate bauxite since the 1950s. What does that leave behind? And there's been a lot of work written by many different people about extractive industries, whether it is Rachel Maddowan in America or other places. The extractive industries leave the holes in the ground. And people have been paid for their land, but the land is never in order for use for agriculture or so on again. It also leaves some wealthy elite in the country wealthier. But overall, it impoverishes the life of the natives of the country. So that has been proven all over. And that is happening in many countries. I said that there was a problem in Australia where there was some sacred land which one of these large extractive industries was going to destroy. It's the same thing that goes, whether it's in Brazil, or it's in Jamaica, or it is in the United States, that these folks believe they have a right to destroy the land in order to get their short-term gains, and it doesn't matter how it impacts on the native people or anyone else, as long as their needs are met. And that in itself requires rethinking.
Yes, it certainly does. Yes, I feel for you in Jamaica with the bauxite, and in so many other parts of the world we hear, and the environment around the extraction areas is also not easily habitable, and people have so many problems. But you're raising such good points here. So Professor Satie, have you got anything else that you want to follow up to ask Hilary?
Not really something to ask, but to now put my own perspective on the reparations debate. Each time I teach a topic on slavery, it's one of the debated issues I have with students, and I always ask, how should reparations be paid to Africans? Is it to the Africans in the diaspora who are direct descendants of the victims, or is it to the Africans in Africa? We haven't found the answer.
No, and I don't think there's any one answer, because I was having a discussion with a Jamaican-born psychiatrist based in Britain, and his view was that the people in Britain, the Caribbean people in Britain and the African people in Britain, that some of the reparations should be paid to them. But remember, it's not only an economic issue, There are many elements that have to go into it. And so I think we need to come up with a more comprehensive perspective on reparations. Who did wrong? And as I said, there are legal remedies, there are other kinds of remedies which we can use. But the important thing is that we have to be able to use remedies. We can't be in denial. Nothing happened and it was another generation, full stop. So I unfortunately don't have any one answer, but I think there are many answers which are contextual, which are because we're not expecting the reparations to go into the same post-colonial elites in our countries, because that's another disaster to come.
Yes. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks ever so much, Professor Satie. That's great. We've got quite a few points being made in the chats here, so I'll just summarise a few of them. I think one of the things that perhaps conscious people like myself are aware of is that the loans for clearing the debt were only cleared in 2015. Joanna's telling us. And that in 1833, the cost of the compensation amounted to 40% of the government's annual expenditure. I think the whole thing about the reparation that was paid to the plantation owners is something that's come out since the University College of London
Yes.
slave ownership website. I can't remember what it's called. You can look up and check who got paid what. Okay, so that's that point. Let me just go. And Apu Bagga says between 15 and 17 billions per paid in today's amount to British families, who were many of whom were MPs, like David Cameron's family, and who bought political power with the same compensation they were receiving from all those years. Right. And Jim says Britain alone extracted over 50 trillion duty from African colonisation in today's money. How much are you asking Britain to pay back, and to whom? Well, I think we should invite Vereen Shepherd. She's the director of the Reparation Unit at the University of the West Indies. And I'm going to be talking on her radio programme shortly. So so we'll invite her to come along here and talk to us about this, I think. Okay, so Juanita says the Windrush generation were also a part of people paying taxes. So they would have been helping the British government to repay the great loan that they had to take out to pay that reparation fee. So lots of points there, folks. It's difficult to see. Somebody asked a different question altogether. Let me just see, who was it? Oh, Sibani, you wanted to know more about Trinidad, but I'm going to suggest, I think, Sibani, that we perhaps follow that one up another time, because that's perhaps not your biggest specialism, Hilary.
No, but tell that person there are two books which I would say, I mean, and many have been written since, which I would read Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, and I would also read Lonely Londoners. I think one book was written in the 40s, 1940s, one was written in the 50s, and then what has come after that. So get an idea about Trinidad, which was settled late by the British, which was before that a French colony, has a different kind of history, has the clash between the indentured people from India and the people coming from other Caribbean countries. So the Caribbean represents, although it's a small number, it represents a very complex set of interplays of situations, which can, I think, provide some idea where the world could be. One of the things that Rick Snettleford said, that the people in the Caribbean were among the first globalized citizens in the world.
Yes.
And the last point that I want to make right now is that what we're calling globalization today, that, the world, it has been connected for a long time. So it's not a piece over here and a piece over there. That there are linkages that we need to look at to make sense of the world today. Okay, that's my last point.
Okay, right. Well, thank you so much. And the books that you're talking about, it's Eric Williams, Capitalism and
Slavery.
And Slavery. And what was the other book you said?
Samuel Selman, who is a Trinidadian writer who lived in London in the 1950s and 60s, I think up to 70s. The Lonely Londoners and so on. As I said,
Lonely Londoners.
But I'm just saying those are classics.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll put that in the update for people to.
And I think one more thing I want to say is that we talked about UCL's research. The academy has a critical role to play in terms of these reparations. The excavation of knowledge, because the academy has been used to perpetuate all kinds of things that are not true. And I think that when the academy works well, it is able to provide information, it is able to provide knowledge, it is able to help to empower people to think about solving problems, and even to help to develop strategies.
Yes. I think we can go much further with this discussion, and that's certainly something we need to do. The new director of the UCL,
he's Jamaican.
whatever, is Jamaican. I can't think of his name
Yes,
just off
he
the
is.
top of my head.
Yes,
And we've asked one of his team to come and speak with us, either for this session or maybe the North Wales Jamaica
That's a
Society.
great idea. His initial research was about ET, and then he's a fantastic young man. So I think that's a great. He'd make a great addition to the discourse.
Yes, that's
Matthew.
Really
his
good.
name is.
Yeah.
What I don't remember his surname. Matthew. I don't remember.
Matthew, I can't remember.
Yes.
We'll look it up. I have written to him, but I got a reply to saying he was being overwhelmed by emails. So one of his colleagues replied. Joanna, do you want to make your point?
Thank you. I mean, I've come to all of this relatively recently. I don't have any ancestors, luckily, who stand in the slave owners camp, and I don't have any black ancestors, but I have lots of black friends because of my daughter being in Uganda. And my background is in natural resource conservation, hence my recent point. Listening to the discussion about reparations and equality and how unfair everything is, that the people who have the resources in their backyard don't actually benefit from them, but the capitalists that exploit us do. And I think there's a very interesting modern parallel happening in the way China is occupying African countries. I say I have firsthand knowledge of this. Because of the way that the Convention on Biological Diversity has been shaped, and it's very much about native people benefiting first of all from their own resources, even if that possibly that means leaving them as they are because they have a relationship with their environment. But it would be good to try and put these discussions into some of these big international conferences like the climate change one that's coming up, and and the biodiversity conference, which is taking place in China this year. I know there are an awful lot of influential people in this group, and you have the connections, Liz. I don't. So it's just a matter of broadening the discussion. And I think, the whole subject of reparation, can these be interpreted in a new light and looking to the future, so that we can build this into all sorts of agreements and arrangements and mechanisms that are about using the world's natural resources. I'm a dedicated conservationist, natural resource conservation, treading lightly on the planet. I think it's a whole fascinating discussion, and it's really got me excited. So thank you to everybody who's stimulated this.
Thank you very much indeed as well to you, Joanna. And I think that we'll go more into the reparation discussion again on a very small scale. Learning Links International and the North Wales Jamaica Society are working with the community in Pennants, Jamaica, and that's a direct link with the Penman Castle Pennants family. And so we're doing something there which Vereen Shepherd calls community reparation. So she said it's the first example she's come across where you've got that sort of that level, not the sort of university level or, heaven forbid, David Cameron saying, well, perhaps we can pop all this behind us now, or whatever it was he said when he went to Jamaica and annoyed everybody so much. So I think we've got some more things in the chat, which I'll just quickly go through. Again, thanks to you, Hilary. Another fascinating book in the study of international trade and economic development of the period of slavery is Africans and the Industrial Revolution in England by Professor Inikori. Sorry, the writing's jumping up and down. Okay, so and David said that Patrick Scallon's Slave Empire is a good summary of the present state of our knowledge and Britain's involvement. What I'll do is I'll take all these quotes from the chat and we'll put them into the I won't have to write anything, will I? In the next update, you'll have done it all for me, so that's excellent. Right.
Yes, yes.
So Hilary, unless there's anything urgent anybody else wants to ask, okay, I think we'll say thank you to Hilary, because she's valiantly been with us for an hour now, coping over the phone,
Okay.
and we really appreciate it. You're welcome to hang on with us, Hilary, till we get to the end of the session, but we'll be finishing in about 10 minutes or so. Okay, what do you want to do, Hilary?
I think I'm going to have to go because we're still having this power problem.
That's all right. I quite understand. I quite understand. So, Hilary, thank you very much indeed. And I think I'd like to invite you back again, if that's all right. And then we can have perhaps a more relaxed discussion that time next time. Thank you so much. You've managed brilliantly. That's absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, the joys of Skype and Zoom combined. Oh, right. Thank you very much, everybody, for helping to facilitate getting through that, and I hope it wasn't too difficult for you to hear. So I think the promises that I've made during the session are to make sure that the points that you've been making and the books that you've been listing will just summarize all of that. And I know Helen, you put a comment early on to Jessica saying you'd be interested in finding out more because you did your PhD at Bangor on Ethiopian children's literature and still work with learners with different Ethiopian languages. So there's lots of interesting comments and contacts and lists. So we're also going to have a regular participants contact list. So if you want to be on the regular participants contact list with a little description about yourself, we're going to put that on the website as well. So I just want to say what I'm going to do with this book then. Right. You know, I just pull books out every now and again. I have certain key books that I have here in Australia with me. The books that you pop in your luggage because you can't leave them behind. And this is one of them, and I'm so glad I've got it here. Anyway, the chapter that I talked to Hilary about, because it's not, from my point of view, and I've confessed this before, I don't read easily. I mean, I can read fine, but when it comes to some academic books, I'm not too hot. Anyway, the chapter 2 is called The European American Psychosis. And it's a psychohistoriographical perspective of contemporary Western civilization. Now, Fred's next book that he published after this was called Owning Our Madness, and that was really interesting as well. So I'll have to try and get hold of a copy of that. But what I'm going to do is I'll copy the first part of this chapter, and then there's this fantastic diagram which has got the white Europe and then the black rest of the world in a timeline form. And then he takes in 12 sections, he goes through and articulates a little more about this. So what I think, if Hilary's all right with us working on this chapter, I'll send the first lot first, and then perhaps we can do one or two of these sections with a bit more reading. We'll just do it every week, and then you'll get all the information, and it won't seem too heavy. So I think that'll be useful. And in terms of resources, the other thing that I'm really excited about, Professor Satie said a couple of weeks back that it's really important, if we're talking about Black history, that we remember that Africans talk about African history, and that African history should be told and taught by Africans. So I was doing some research, and do you remember, Simon, when the rapper Yarkill spoke, he talked about the books of history of Africa that came through the UNESCO project. Well, they're now, they've now been serialized into 20 episodes by an African presenter who's lived in the UK most of her life. She's well known. And that's absolutely fascinating. So what I've painstakingly done and put on the website, so I hope you have a look at it and try it out, is that I've put a tab on the side of the website, which is the www.spanglefish.com/Black History website, which we keep the records from all these sessions. It's the last tab at the bottom at the moment about the UNESCO history of Africa. And I've put them all down, all 20 episodes, and put the links in there for all 20 episodes on YouTube. So you can binge watch that. So, great idea. But it really is fascinating because they're so well produced, and they've got lots of academics and interesting people speaking, just fantastic. So that's my rave of the week. So over to you if there's anything else that anybody else wants to bring up, and thank you for the comments in the chat. Yeah, Joanna?
No, it's all right. I just would like to say goodbye, everybody. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Okay, bye. Right, anything else that Lindsay, you didn't have a chance to introduce yourself. Are you there?
I am here, and I apologize for arriving late.
That's perfectly all right. We're just glad to see you. Lindsay, remind me where you're from. I forget.
Chesterfield.
Oh yes, I ask you every week, don't I?
You do, yes. Chesterfield hasn't moved.
Well, that's a relief. You
I
mean
haven't moved either very much, I have to say. We're all in lockdown, so mobility this is the most mobile I get, actually, talking to people from different places, including other parts of the world, which is wonderful.
Well, that's lovely and lovely of you to say. And I hope the devil hasn't twisted your spire in Chesterfield any further.
Oh, there are so many stories about that.
Because it's an amazing church with a wooden spire.
It is, and the less than exotic story about it is that the person who built it in non-seasoned wood.
Yes.
And it twisted, and of course now it's famous. But the person who was responsible for that got hammered, and has no idea how famous his twisted tower has ever become.
Absolutely, we discuss it between continents. Okay. All right. Now, Jim, you've been very, very quiet today. Thank you very much indeed. Being cheeky here. Jim and I had quite a long conversation before this session. So, Jim, have you got anything that you want to wrap up with today?
It's been interesting. No, not at all. Good to see some new people, and good to see Sabani joining us as well.
Excellent.
I think we're building up a great deal of historical material, and thank you for all the work you've done, Liz, to pull some of this together and put on the website.
Yeah, and Jim and I are talking as well about how to manage to get the books to you, Professor Satie. And Jim's got an idea. What do you think we'll have to do? Is it contact the Jamaican High Commission?
Yes, I sent some books to Uganda last year, and I got in touch with the Ugandan embassy, and they gave me some advice. I put it in a barrel, it's a very big barrel. It cost me £140, and that's all I did. I got the barrel delivered to a London address, and I think the embassy then took over and gave the people who posted this concessions. And I also gave a lady a couple of suitcases, which was extra luggage, and she paid. She was supposed to pay extra for the weight, but the airline didn't exempt her from the weight because she had credentialed about organizing a charity to take this material to Uganda. And Sierra Leone, I've sent some to Sierra Leone as well. My wife was an English teacher until she retired a few years ago. So she had several, in every room there was a library in our house. And so we couldn't throw them away. But the local shops, Age Concern and so on, knew us very well. And they said, we haven't got any shelf space, Mr. and Mrs. Nicodin. So you've got to find other outlets. So we thought we'd send it to Africa. We sent some to Jamaica and some to Bangladesh. But we still got a couple thousand books around the house and in the garage.
Well, we'll have to be thinking. Yes, come in, please, Professor Sati. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the donation of the books. When the library got burnt in the University of Jos, the librarians set up collection points across the world. There's one, I mean, about 2 in the USA, there's 1 in South Africa. So I'll find out if there's a collection point in the UK.
Oh, please.
And that I think that will be, yes. If I do find out that there's a collection point in the UK, I will send a link to you or the address to you so that we can, okay.
That's just what we need. Now, at the moment, Salamatu Fada, who first introduced me to you, Professor Sati, she's in Nigeria at the moment, or she was a week or so ago. I don't know if she still is. So we missed an opportunity there. But if you could try and see if there is a collection point, or if there isn't, try and see how you can create a collection point, because you're obviously organised there. And then we can just get people to direct books to you, and do a bit of, making sure people send sensible things, which I'm sure people will. But I know many of us have got collections of books that, we know we don't want them just to be tossed in the bin. We want them to be used. So that would be excellent. Janita, I can see that you've made a comment here about discussions on reparations. But gosh, it's a complicated question. Can we address that again? I don't think we can do that justice in 2 minutes. So that's another one to follow up. Lovely. Okay, right. So that's certainly very positive, and thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for that contribution. And we're also beginning to look at the themes and threads that are coming through in these conversations, and looking at whether we can begin to produce some ebooks or papers of these. So talking to you, Helen, as I said, and we'll be catching up with others. So thank you very much indeed, all. If there anything else, David, anything you want to add?
No, not really, Liz. Just to thank you again for organising this and for navigating us through the complications of today. Thank you.
It was fun and kept me awake anyway. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed, Junita. Reparations, she says, a future thought, reparations and indentureship. Yes, definitely. Indentureship is something that David and Jim have been talking about, that we need to understand more about. I'm very interested. I don't know if anybody knows anything about the 1938, you might, Abu Bakr, the 1938 riots and issues in the Caribbean. Do you know anything about that?
No, not much about that at all, unfortunately, Liz, no.
Well, that's my latest area of focus, but that's not about indentureship. It's about workers' rights and tenancy on lands of what were plantations. So they're very about 100 years apart. So there are two things, but definitely reparations we need to be looking at again. And it would be great to get the Vereen Shepherd or one of the team from the unit there. So we've got plenty to keep us going over the next few weeks. Next week we've invited Joseph Farquharson, Dr. Joseph Farquharson from the University of the West Indies, Jamaica Language Unit. and I think that that'll be interesting as well. But I think that I will ask Hilary if she's able to join us on other occasions, because I think it would be worthwhile dedicating a small chunk of the session to enabling her to contribute and you to ask questions. So I think that was really useful, really, really useful. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Okay, thank you, Simon, for keeping an eye on it all and making it possible for us all to get together around the world. Look after yourselves.